All right, so now we have an Ultra extension framework integration that is running. We've seen that the JavaScript file is being loaded. And so now we're ready to go on to the next step where we actually make it talk between our application and the Ultra extension framework. Now, one thing to point out, because we're developing with JavaScript that's being loaded in an iframe, anytime you change that JavaScript, you do have to go ahead and clear your cache. Otherwise, it will pull up the JavaScript that was cached previously and you won't know why your stuff's not working. So I've already done that, but definitely before you go on to this step, make sure you log out of Blackboard Learn and you clear that cache. So let's head over to our Visual Studio Code, and we are right exactly where we left off. We've got our tutorial integration. You can see it's still checking to see if we're in an iframe or not. Now for the second thing, the only thing that we're going to be changing in this section is the code here in our tutorial integration, because we're not doing anything, we're not serving up any new HTML, anything like that. So really all we are doing here is we're going to be updating this tutorial-integration.js file with all of the stuff that has to happen in order for us to be authenticated and to start communicating with Ultra. So as before, we'd already done our get fetch origin. So if we do get branch -a, we'll see all of the things. You can see we're still pointing to the LTI to the UEF branch. So let's go ahead and get checkout -b to UEF message channel, because that's what we're going to be working on in this section. And we will ask it to populate this branch with the remote branch of the same name. So to UEF message channel. So hit enter, and now you can see, because I already had the integration JavaScript up, you can see we've got some new stuff. So let's take a look and see what's changed. So we now have a message channel ID that we're declaring globally, and all this is run as soon as the JavaScript is loaded. And now we're adding an event listener. And so we want to add an event listener called message, and when we receive a message, we want to call this function called onPostMessageReceived. And so we are then sending a message to Ultra. So this is our integration saying, hey Ultra, you just loaded us in as an Ultra placement, so we're just going to reach out and say hello. Now you notice here we've got this learn URL, and what this is essentially doing is in the background verifying that yes indeed the learn URL that we are sending this to is the one that we mean to be talking to. So now we see here we have onPostMessageReceived. So this is the function that happens when we get a message from Ultra based on the thing that we've just set up. So the first thing we do is we're testing for the trusted host, just to make sure that we are talking to the system we think we're talking to. And if we are not, then it returns and nothing happens. So as you recall, we sent this integration hello, and so in response, Ultra says hey back. So we've got our integration hello message type. And so if we get this back, that means the message channel is set up. And so we are pointing the message channel to a log message channel. And so if we scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see log message channel essentially just allows us to print stuff to the JavaScript console, so we can see what's happening in the JavaScript console as our integration is working. So let's move back up a little bit and see what we're doing when that happens. So we've said hello, they've said hello back, so we've set up our message channel, and now we're going to post a message to the message channel saying that we want to authorize as our user. And so this token is the three-legged OAuth, the result of the three-legged OAuth, where we've gotten our authorization code, we've then used that to request a REST token, and this is the token ID, the bearer token. And so this quickly and easily ties the session that we are talking to within Blackboard Learn with the session that we're talking to here within our application. And so we are sending the authorization request, and when we receive a message from Ultra, which you can see is what we're doing when message channel gets a message. When we receive a message from Ultra, this is where we process it. And so we've got a message from Ultra. The message data type is authorization authorize. If for some reason authorization failed, this would be authorization unauthorized, and we're not handling it in this particular case, but you would definitely want to do that in a production environment. And so we're saying when we get authorized, call unauthorized with Ultra. And so here's the magic. Here, when we say we are authorized with Ultra, we post a message and we say we want to subscribe to events. And there's a ton of events, and we'll talk about them over the course of this Ultra Extension Framework cohort and tutorial. But we're listening to a number of them. Now, for this exact integration, the only thing that we really need is route, portal new, and portal remove. But I wanted to add click and hover for a couple of reasons. Number one, hover. That means we get a message anytime you hover over something in the user interface. And this is super helpful when you're trying to figure out what events you want to use in order to trigger events, to trigger actions from within your application. And so I've added hover just so you can see, and I've added click so you can see what happens when you click on various things. But in our case, we're going to be using route, and route tells us, okay, the user just changed from one screen to another, and this is where they move to. And so with route, we'll be able to tell what course you're in. If you click on a content item, we'll be able to tell what course you're in and what content ID you clicked on, and that's going to help us set up the rest of our application. So that's pretty much what we've added. I will say that one other thing, minor thing that we added is in our app.py, we are now, when we render our index.html, we're sending it a couple of things. We're sending it the learn URL as we have pulled from our configuration, and we're sending it that token. So when you get to index.html, you can see we're setting these as variables prior to loading our JavaScript integration. And so when you go back to the tutorial integration at the top, you can see that we are, you can see that's where this this learn URL is populated. That's where this token is populated. So let's go ahead and load this up and see what happens. So again, we're using Docker, so we'll say Docker build -t UEF tutorial, and we'll give this one a 0.3 and a period to show where the Docker file is. And so now we've built our Docker image, and let's go ahead and run it. So we'll say Docker run -p for ports 5,000 on the host is forwarded to in the container is forwarded to 5,000 on the host. We're giving it the name UEF tutorial 3, and then we just need to point it to the image that we just built. And so now you can see our server is running. So we can go ahead over to our Docker desktop. You can see here we are running. If you were to click on this, you could see this. You could inspect the variables that are being passed. You could get some stats. And if you were to click here, you could actually get a command line interface into the actual running container so that you could check things in there. In our case, we are just going to first verify that everything is working as we expected. So head ngrok, we will command click, and Docker container is successfully running through ngrok. So now let's go and learn and see what happens. So just a reminder, I have already cleared my cache. You will need to do that before you log in. But we're going to log in and take a look at what's happening over here on the right, and we'll see if our tutorial-integration.js starts talking. So we'll go ahead and sign in, and we'll load a bunch of stuff. And this is a pretty busy server with a lot of integrations already. So there is a lot of noise in here, but you can see right here, tutorial-integration.js was loaded. You can see we have sent the authorization request with our token to Learn Ultra. Learn Ultra has responded with authorization authorize, and then we've asked to subscribe, And in our message, we are subscribing to click, hover, route, portal name, portal remove. And you can see then it sends me my first message. The route has changed and I am now on base institution page admin. As you can imagine, that is the institution page. But watch what happens as I hover over things. We get new messages telling us that, hey, these are all the things that you're hovering over. And so if you look at this hover message, you can see analytics ID equals grades.base.navigation.handlebase.link. If you wanted to do like we did for the leaderboard at DevCon, when somebody clicked on the grades link, this is the click event that you would get. It would have this analytics ID, and then you can say, okay, they just clicked on the grades link, and so when they do that, I want to open a panel. And so we will talk a little bit about how to interact with these types of messages in just a moment.